Good morning, friends. I come from Pondicherry, and it's a wonderful place, imbued with the atmosphere of the mother's love, and the place of tapasya, the seat of tapasya of Sri Aurobindo. Its ancient name is Vedpuri, where Rishi Agast had done a similar kind of tapasya in far back times. And what I bring from there is some good news, better news, and a best news, and something better than the best. The good news is that this world is not an accident. It is not a random working out of nature through all our ignorance. And all the events that seem to shape our lives have hidden within them a deep wisdom, an occult truth. As Sri Aurobindo puts it, a truth occult has made this world. And Maya is a veil of the absolute. It is not some cunning of Miss Maya that has led us into some state of perdition. A truth stands behind creation, not just as a helpless witness, as we are told sometimes, but as a dynamic source of all things, the dynamic source of life and energy and love. Just like our sun, the source of light that shows all things, but also the source of heat that gives birth to all things, absorbs back all things, sustains all things. So this truth is at once passive, a witness, and dynamic, a doer, the soul doer. One of the Upanishads puts it beautifully, Suryo yatha sarvalokasya chakshu, nalipyate chakshushe bahidosha. It is engaged, it witnesses all things. He is the eternal witness, so we don't have to worry when we go through different acts of life and we want somebody to know what we have done. There is an eternal knower. He knows. We don't have to worry about what people think or what they say or how they look at it. He knows. He has the record of everything within us. It's so wonderful to know this. But there is a better news, and the better news is that we need not accept it as a belief system. That there is God, there is truth, there is, call it by whatever names. The better news is that we carry that source within ourselves, and there are ways and processes by which we can not only glimpse or come in contact, but actually become one with that truth. Sounds bold and presumptuous, but that has been the experience of all the mystics throughout this world. And that process of an initial engagement, an eventual discovery, and finally becoming one with that truth is called yoga. Yoga has little to do with merely mind-body techniques. It can be a preliminary and a preparation. After all, we are going to engage with truth that can burn the whole creation and gives birth to all creation. So it's good to do some warm-up exercises. So all the exercises of body and breath and mind control, and they are like warm-up exercises because we are going to meet our soul beloved, one whom we have been searching through many masks, through many lives. So it's wonderful that we can become one with it. It's not belief system, it's not a religion, but it's yoga. And that's why there is a difference between faith and belief system. Belief systems begin and end with a belief system. But faith is something which precedes knowledge. It's the starting point of a great journey, a discovery. To put it like this, when somebody undertakes, some of us have undertaken, first time they have come here. And some of us undertake a journey, let's say to go to Pondicherry or the Himalayas for the first time. Then we have a faith that there is something like that. This faith is not a belief system where I believe that there is Himalayas, and because my grandparents told me so, and because the grandparents or my grandparents told me so, and because my religion says so, and because so and so says so. No. It's a faith, and that discovery must be undertaken, otherwise it's meaningless. It's not enough to know that there is such a wonderful truth lying within us unless we engage with it with all the sincerity, with all the intensity that we are capable of, and are ready to make this sincerity and this intensity grow over a period of time. And the best news is that in this engagement, we are not alone. It's not a one-sided process. It's not like I have been taught some techniques and methods and I do it all by myself. It's not through a handbook that one practices yoga. Try it. So, there is the source not only within us, not only around us, but it takes a human shape. He comes to us as the master of yoga. Or if none of these, the divine from within who is all around, he helps. He's not just an abstract occult truth. It's a being for a very simple logic, People often ask, because when they think of being, they think of all the definitions of God with always has to be a bearded God, I don't know why, and has to be with a carrot in one hand and a stick in another, that also I don't know why. It's because human beings project themselves into God and there is truth in it. But the very fact that there is something, or whatever we may call it, that which is all conscious and all knowing, surely it knows itself and is conscious of itself. By definition, it's a being. The moment we say it's a tremendous truth consciousness, so it'll be observed that this truth consciousness knows everything except its own self. The moment it knows itself, it's a being by definition, not the being that we project by our minds, which is accepted because, we start by groping, when we learn in kindergarten how to write ABCD, the teacher does not dismiss our first illegible scrawl, keeps improving upon it till we finally learn that yes, this is what A is and this is how it becomes perfect. So these notions have been accepted simply because they were necessary. So all religion is like a kindergarten school where we have notions of the beyond, we have notions of God, we have ideas of hell and heaven and God knows karma and this theory and that theory. But the real process starts when we start engaging, not just it as a belief system or religion or an ideology, but actually trying to reach there. And it is then that we discover that there is a help and an aid that is available all the time. So this is the best news. And this help is not dependent on this or that person. If we are really seeking for it, we must know for sure that that is also seeking for us. This is a very beautiful line from Sri Aurobindo's Synthesis of Yoga. He who chooses the infinite has been chosen by the infinite. So we may think that we decided to come first, but there is someone else who decided that, okay, now this fellow is ready, let's enroll. So that's the best news. Thus far, we know many mystic literatures speak about it, at least some parts of it, some way or the other. Sri Aurobindo also speaks about it, but then truth for him is not just a witness, but a dynamic reality. Also, the yoga he speaks about is not just a partial yoga. Partial system of yoga is where a part of us glimpses something of that reality. The heart glimpses the secret beloved, and the mind, the source of all light, the supreme effulgence, the radiance, and the will in us discovers the master of all works, the soul doer. These are partial systems of yoga. Sri Aurobindo speaks of integral yoga, meaning thereby, why not a wholesale engagement? Why should we do in bits and parts? Imagine somebody loves us, or we love someone, and we give in bits and parts. That's not called self-giving. It doesn't lead to utter union. If you really want to engage with that truth, then it should be a completeness in it. And that completeness, to use one word, is integral yoga, without going into all the semantics, definitions, and details. It's a complete engagement with that reality, including the bodily engagement. Everything should be engaged in that discovery, because everything has come from that. But as I said, there is a still better news, if better than best there can be. And it is that this truth which is unfolding from within all things, this unfolding is called as evolution in biology because we don't see what is unfolding. But in spiritual science it is called as manifestation because that is manifesting itself. So it has reached a critical point in the history of creation. And that point is now when something new is seeking to burst out, a new evolutionary energy which is trying to express itself. Before we talk a little bit about this new evolutionary energy, people have a problem when it is said that this creation is a manifestation of the divine. This truth which is there is not a harsh, bare reality. We often have this idea, truth. Truth is harsh, you can't take it. Those who have experienced truth will say truth is beautiful. It's the most beautiful without anything or person than anything else in the world. It's harmonious. It's blissful. And the moment we speak of that, the question arises, but this creation, where is beauty in it? Well, there is. Till man came, there was a lot of beauty. And even in man, we shouldn't demean man. Sublime impulses. Look at a mother not eating, not sleeping, because she's worried about her child. What kind of love is this? Even as human beings, there are beautiful things that stir us. You see, sometimes we are too much taken away with all the media stories. So you say, where is the new creation? New creation is everywhere. Wherever there is a heart, there is a new creation taking shape. Wherever there is a seeking, there is a new creation taking shape. Wherever there is an aspiration. So this manifestation is not a sudden one-day manifestation, it's a process. So step by step it is unfolding itself. And in this unfolding, what we call today as evil and ugliness and all kinds of things, they come up strangely, paradoxically, interestingly. They are thrown up by the Supreme Wisdom so that we can discard it once and for all to emerge into something more beautiful and better. After all, this was the evil that yesterday we loved. 100 years back, humanity engaged with all these things, the gladiators, the all kinds of things, animal slaughter, ransacking the earth, which we did it. We never thought that it's something evil. Today we know it is evil. Why? Because there is a progress which has taken place. Somewhere we have learned. Now, it's very interesting that this night, every time before, we can compare this whole new creation to the process of childbirth. So before every time there is something new which is going to come, there is a preceding event. So, in Indian mythology, it's like before Krishna there is Kansa, before Rama there is Ravana. So before Sri Aurobindo, there is not one but quite a few who came. And their names are legion. What are their names? Imperialism, Freudianism, biologically based communism. Why I am saying is because there is a divine communism, there is a truth in it. All these fellows came and declared by consensus that there is nothing like divine positivism. Good, it had a good turn to it. There were all kinds of things which came. And along with that, if you really look at, just make a search of the revolutions in various centuries, suddenly you will see that everything stops with the 18th century. 1700 middle, you see the age of revolution starts. Goes on till almost even now we feel the stirrings, only its nature has changed. What was happening before that? Was mankind sleeping? Perhaps it was. It had accepted a status quo. Things are the way they are for thousands of years. Women were where they were. The slaves were where they were. And we had all accepted those fixed positions for 1,000 years. More than that. It just needs a little, everything is now available on When did the revolution start? When is the age of revolution? We'll see late, mid 1700, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, many other revolutions we started. What were these revolutions? They were preparing the soil. You know, when a farmer, before he sows the seeds, the new creation seeds, he must till the soil. So it was a tilling of the human soil. Because if it remains in its comfort zones, what is called as tamas, it cannot conceive. It has to be ready for the blossom which is going to come, even before the seed is cast. So around that period we see a preparation going on. And then there is this conception. Now what is this conception? Who are the parents for this new creation? It is the soul and nature. They've been fighting for a long time. Sometimes the soul turns away from nature and says, I don't like you. I take divorce. So you have the otherworldly spirituality, Vedanta, of a certain kind, not the true Vedanta, not the original Vedanta of Sri Krishna, not the Vedanta of Bhishma, but the Vedanta as it came down, Mayavad, she is a bad lady, Maya, she has ensnared me, she has ruined my life, let me turn away from her into some state of moksha. The husband goes away. How will the lady conceive? Soul is the husband. That's the meaning of the Shivalinga, incidentally. Or else, nature revolted. You talk about spiritual things, moksha and this, that. I'm not going to leave you. So all kinds of snares. So a kind of relation developed between soul and nature, which was as if they were mutually antagonistic to each other. So mystics began to withdraw into caves. And their address was cave number 22, Himalayas. Cave number 33, till Coca-Cola found its way there also. I'm not joking. You go to Badrinath, you will see the world's highest tea stall. And you will see a Coca-Cola and nature has its way. She says, wherever you go, I am not separate from you. You want to go to your parents' place? You know, it's a reverse. I am going to catch you there. I'll make sure that you come back. So this uneasy compromise has been going on between the two with all the theories and various theories. But nature and soul are not two separate. They are not meant to be separate. They are meant to come together, harmonize, both to grow. You know how this growth takes place? That's why people say don't conceive, don't have a child very soon in marriage. There's a great truth in it. Prepare yourself, know each other, otherwise you will end up fighting. So, for a long time, now this is a child of new creation which has to come. So for a long time they are fighting, then they begin to reconcile. You know how people living together over 4 or 5 or 6 years. I have to say some of the things because there are a lot of youngsters, you have called them, future mothers. So they must know, it goes parallel. If you know spiritual life, you will know everything about every form of life. This I can tell you. Don't treat spirituality as something other than life. The same pattern. If you read that script, you can read all other scripts of creation. So then they prepare and then they start coming up. So there is the conception. How does it take place? Now parents are ready for the child. They start dreaming what this child should be. What do they want? So there is a dreaming phase going on. So we see various ideas, conceptions, Superman and ideas of Superman. Idea even of a new creation. And I was very happy to know, perhaps you may not know, in Greenville there is even a church called New Creation. Interesting. So there are ideas which have gone into this atmosphere. It's conceived as an idea. Before you have an actual conception of a child, it's conceived as an idea. It's also part of the preparation. So mind of the race, you know. And then the child is conceived. And when the child is conceived, who knows? Nobody except the mother. And how does the mother, how is it known to others? Either the mother will tell or she will start throwing up abnormal manifestations. See, it happens not during pregnancy, all doctors know about it. Suddenly mothers begin to vomit, her taste changes. She has never had salty things, she begins to like salty things. Blood pressures go up, isn't it? It's a common knowledge. So what was happening in the last century, and we can see it even now, abnormal manifestations being thrown up by nature. You know, if you read the Bhavishya Puran, It's one of those futuristic things in Indian thought. So it's very interesting that you can read it both ways. So people say, when Kali Yuga is going to be at its densest or the worstest worst, you will see all kinds of abnormal things. Men will become like women and women will become like men. So when I read it, I said, this is not all that bad after all, Basically what it means, if you really look at it, that all the patterns of the present and the past are broken up. All the fixed measures, that's what is happening. A woman's body is reorienting to something new that is going to come. And behind that also you see there's a tremendous logic of nature. She goes through all this. So when she is a child and she has to keep awake, she finds it very comfortable. After all that, these are, something new is coming. It's tumultuous. It's turbulent. It creates a change. So if we look at just around the time, the two great wars, what are they? They are vomitings from nature of all the malaise which was deep hid inside. The worst coming out, not only during the war, not only in the form of people fighting with each other, in the form of worst forms of diseases. Many people may be aware, more people died of flu in the First World War than of the actual weapons. All this was going on. Convulsions of the earth. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. The last dying spasms of the earth shall shake the nations, and when that has passed, earth, vast of its ills, shall raise a fairer brow. So it's a cleansing process. In Savitri there is a line, a seed shall be sown in dread's tremendous hour, in the midnight. A seed is sown when all this tumult is going on. And why this tumult is necessary? Because, see what happens as a result of First World War. Suddenly human beings confronted themselves more than anybody else. We can be so horrible, we can destroy, we were on the verge of finishing everything. So, let's come together. So there was a farcical thing called League of Nations. But it was a, farcical today, but at least a step. People want to come together. Mooted by America. Something very nice. People often forget the beautiful side of history. Then there is another convulsion, followed by United Nations Organization. Now we know that, it's not perfect, it's not adequate, but we can equally say that it's a child which is going to grow up. So more and more the world started coming together, engaging not just in war, but in something more beautiful, because they realized that, it can create life miserable. So these were the abnormal manifestations. The number of people going mad. I'm a psychiatrist by profession. And I can tell you that there is a sizable number of people, I'm not saying all, who look like they are going through madness, but they are going through a deep existential angst. Please don't take it as, an invitation and start writing to me for cure, and I get these letters and I don't know what to say, because it's not like, suddenly you write a letter and I send a magic miracle air. It's a serious thing. But more and more I observe there are terms which are coming up, existential crisis, and it was all these things which we continue to see now. Men trying to become women, women trying to become men, gender neutrality, all these things which we see today as strange are basically presages, because the patterns are broken. Children no more go to temple or the churches except for marriages or to show off their dresses, which is fine, because the age of churches and temples and mosques is over. However hard we may try to hold on to it, the evolutionary process will just demolish it. We don't have to worry so much. We get anxiety, this is happening, that is happening. Look at Sri Aurobindo, the First World War. We just heard a little bit about Savitri. When this Savitri started being written, of course, it's in 1893, Sri Aurobindo did write a very early Earth and the Beyond, but in a proper way, systematic way, if you want to put it. It's when the First World War was at its thick. What was Sri Aurobindo seeing in that darkness? We become cynics looking at life around us. He was seeing light. He was seeing that, darkness is so dense, light is round the corner. Can I invoke that light? See, it has such practical implication in everyday life. We talk about new creation, then we sulk and slump and say, look at CIA, look at KGB, look at this country, that country. darkness is dense, light is round the corner. Didn't a great poet say, when it's winter, then spring is not far away. What happens in winter? Same process. You see, it sheds all its old leaves. The trees shed their old leaves. They become like barren, lifeless things. What is happening? The whole being of the tree is getting self-engaged, deep inside. Why? Because it has to throw up multiple colors in time to come. So that's exactly what we begin to see, that a time comes when all this is going on amidst this turmoil and all the old measures have gone away or are going away. In the Western context here, there were flower children and baby boomers and all kinds of things. In the Indian context, it was, oh, Kali Yuga aa gaya. All our old values have gone. They don't get up and touch the parents' feet. So parents were very worried and disturbed about it. They believe that they are worthy of their feet being touched. That's a different story altogether. Women no more listen to their men. So it was a Satyug for women, but Kalyug, selective Kalyug for men. We have our own ideas of life. But amidst all this, something new had started. Like the winter, the tree had begun to look deep inside for the sources and founts of whatever it was seeking outside. And if you really search, it's amazing that in 1914, Sri Aurobindo, when he starts writing about the synthesis, he says, Indian yoga, once when it had confined itself to the ascetic schools, is now stepping out of the caves into the world. I don't know, the only thing that had started was Swami Vivekananda and subsequent Swami Prabhupada and few others had come here. Swami Rama came subsequently, little later. And of course there was Paramahansa Yogananda. Now what's happened now? 100 years down the line, few days back, we had the International Yoga Day. It doesn't matter. Yes, it's not the ultimate yoga, but it's infancy. Infant is an infant. The parents understand that infant is not supposed to do PhD. At least there is a recognition that there is something greater, deeper, truer. And then people will explore. It's a first lead. And some people may have noticed the coincidence or may not have. The significance of 21st June, which is known now as the International Yoga Day. Well, the Arya was conceived at that time. It is the summer solstice, that's true. It's also symbolic. And it's the day when the Arya was conceived, through which Sri Aurobindo has lines, page after page, to the earth's dim children were given. That's how the Arya is best described, like that. Wine of the gods, born from the presses of light, and page by page to the dim children of earth were given. The entire writings, through the Arya. That is the time when 1914 to 1920, Sri Aurobindo writes the Arya, and we have Savitri 1916 onwards, and getting completed around the Second World War. Because these were very obvious signs. Now we see that human beings are entering into a subjective stage. People are often very worried about it. They say that, oh, my child now, doesn't listen to me. This is one of the big problems. It just doesn't listen to me. Of course, again, I always say that as parents, and I can say this, I am a parent myself, that please let a sobering and humbling thought come to us, because humility opens the doors to knowledge. Am I worth listening? Maybe I'm disconnected. Maybe my children think I'm talking gibberish, and it's enough that they are just somehow listening and not telling me back that, look, don't be a hypocrite. It's going to come when children are going to say that, well, we respect you, but it doesn't mean, By the way, it's described in Indian mythology. So for children, those who parents may say sometimes, oh, what has happened to these children? The first child who revolted in Indian mythology, know his name? His name is Prahlad. What did he tell his dad? Dad, everything is okay, I respect you, but I don't believe what you are saying. You are saying, I am God. I am saying, you are not God. God is God. He is there in everything. You are not there in everything. You are just the king of a kingdom. You can't be God. But don't we still follow that? We as parents believe after 25, 30 that I know all that is called knowledge. That's when knowledge ends and ignorance begins. If you really want to know, we don't have to read books. Books are okay, they are aids, but they can also create structures. But we have to be like a child. Throughout, there is always something to learn. There is so much. And just to engage with things, to go deeper, not be satisfied with just reading some bit of information, whether it's scientific literature or this or that. The moment we have this sense of wonder, this seeking for something greater, higher, truer, more beautiful, yoga has begun. It doesn't need to be in a, we go to a hermitage or an ashrama where there is a orange robed or a white robed or whatever robed fellow who tells us, from today thou shalt begin the yoga. Let's get rid of all these puerile conceptions, useful in their own time, but we are entering more and more an age when yoga will automatically become activated in human consciousness, because human beings are meant for yoga in the truest sense. We cannot live without it. That's why we are unhappy, dissatisfied ever, because the only thing that can really fulfill us is a deep engagement with yoga. So we see this subjective stage which has started, because of which now children want to do what they feel like doing. Now there will be errors, of course. If you want no errors, then you will have the perfection of a paralyzed child. I have coined some of the terms. One of them is zero error syndrome. Parents suffer from it and they instill it in the child also. So when we grow into adults, we suffer. Oh, what if I make mistakes? So our centering is on mistakes. Whoever did anything beautiful in life did it because he took the wager of mistakes. And therefore he went ahead. Oh, what is the perfect way to do yoga? Should I sit with 360 degrees or 180 degrees? Am I reclining against the back? Is it okay or not? Trash. What's going on inside is more important than what's going on outside. All the yogis who ever found something, it was because they carried this fire wherever they went. And it is this fire which opens the door. I want to know. It doesn't matter lying down, sitting, walking, which way in Greenville, in Furman University, eating food, Pondicherry, X, Y, Z, and all the world in between. This is what is happening. This subjective age has started. So people have become explorers of an inner life landscape. Unwittingly. They don't know, but they are. That's why these children are so beautiful. Because they don't believe anything just because it has come from inheritance, which is very good, because they are discarding not only good inheritance, but they are also discarding all the evil inheritance. Lots of shadows we have inherited. We don't realize it because we just identify it, like in the Indian context, the Sas, who had suffered as a Bahu. When she became a Sas, she was not having it didn't have a sobering effect on her. She became a worse. Here there are good people, I know that. This is new creation. But old creation, you see, the mother-in-law, when the daughter-in-law came, she was pretty bad, harsh. And the logic, very twisted logic. The logic was, how we were dealt with. Then have compassion. If you were. No, this happened to us, therefore we must pass it on. Now children are freed from this baggage. It's a freeing from the baggage of the past which is going on, and we should be happy about it, but we are so unhappy when we look at these. So this freeing process is going on. This is a sign, the restlessness, hyperactivity of the mind. We talk about, truth is beyond the mind. Very good. We are not even mental beings. That's the problem. So when we talk about beyond the mind, sitting in meditation, we go into sleep. And we say, wonderful meditation. I came out so fresh. Of course, you sleep and you will be fresh. As long as you don't snore and disturb somebody else's sleep. There's a joke about it that two people, two friends used to go to a place for meditation. And one of the friends was very impressed by the other fellow. He comes, closes the eyes, 2 hours he's meditating. He said, I wish I could have 1/10 of this. One day, this friend just won't get up. He said, now, this is samadhi. So for another half an hour he waited. What to do? Now, ultimately your survival instincts take the better of samadhi. So he gently nudged him. I'm sorry, to bring you out of that high state, but, oh, is it? Everybody has gone? I had a wonderful sleep today. So let's not mistake meditation with closing the eyes. Let's not mistake it with, because when the mind is in a state of tamas, this is what happens. When somebody came to Swami Vivekananda and said, I'll renounce everything. I want to renounce everything. So what was Swami Vivekananda's reply? What do you have that you will renounce? Go and earn 1 lakh rupees, then talk about renunciation. So you see, this state of tamas should not be mistaken, this inertia. This is not, immediately, the moment we talk about, I remember in Air Force days when I would go up and down a lift. Early morning we used to go to a center to do some work. And in the lift I would meet sometimes some of my friends, so one of the Air Force officers. So you go every morning? I said, yeah, where do you go? He said, there is a Sri Aurobindo center here. Oh, you do yoga there? Now I know what he's going to ask. Thankfully it was only the lift. So I didn't have to answer much. I just nodded and came out. What kind of yoga? What exercises do they teach? This yoga is about inner exercises. It's not about outer exercise. The inner exercises, try doing topsy-turvy, Sirsasana and see what happens. We are looking at the world with inverted eyes. And when we correct itself, we say it's Sirsasana. When we do it inside, then we realize, oh, the world is not what I saw. This is called reversal of consciousness. When we touch even a little fragment of truth, the whole consciousness reverses. And we begin to see wisdom where we saw chaos. This is the beauty of this whole process. So we see all this going on in today's times. Many such things. Now it is so strange and surprising that last 75 years we have the atom bomb and every country threatens everybody because I have the atom bomb. In the previous century, in the first 50 years, when there was no atom bomb except toward the end, we see 2 great wars where almost every nation got drawn willy-nilly, isn't it? What stopped the war strangely was an atom bomb, which is look at the ways things work. Now, today with 75 years of atom bomb, humanity goes to its brink and comes back. The latest was on 21st June, when it was like a drone has been hit and we are going to, but it comes back from the brink inexplicably. What is this? Has there ever been this kind of aspiration in humanity? How does this new creation declare itself? First in the dreams, imaginations of the race. All these, suddenly we have superhero comics, all these Marvel, DC, all coming up alive with saving the earth. I'm not saying that, you can look at it in another way, but let's look at things in a, as I said, it's an infancy. But at least there is a cry, there is an urge. Something better, something more beautiful. Yoga which turned away from the world. 100 years back, I come from a land of yoga. And fortunately, by Mother's grace, I've studied a lot of literature from the past. And everywhere this was my problem. What is all this ultimately otherworldly? Then what is this world? What is this creation? Nowadays people they want to make this world beautiful. 100 years back, this was not an option. There was religion. There was no yoga. Or let's say that the original yoga had degenerated into a religion. So what does religion teach? Be a good guy, you have your rewards elsewhere. What about this place? Forget about it. You want the reward? You have your reward. That is promised. All that you need is this what is this badge from an university, and you will get your lunch free out there. You can't take it anywhere else. So if you have signed up to a particular religious order, to a sect, to a monastery, call it whatever, and you have this tag inside stamped upon you, baptized, initiated, so on and so forth, you will have your reward. Where? In that world. What about this world? Karma, you know. You have to go through that. So what will the reward do? What will we do with that reward? We don't know. Maybe you will not come back to this mess. That in the Indian context it was ensured you will not come back into this mess. So the Western religion went one step further. It says there is no comeback any which way. All that is there is that you can either suffer a damnation or you can be lifted up to heaven. All that is needed is, well, I owe my allegiance. So, but what about this world? An inexplicable something. Kal or Maya or Titan or I don't know, evil or what is that fellow who tempted the first man and woman? Whoever it was. Yeah. Jehovah. All these kind of concepts everywhere. It's not every religion has similar conceptions that this is a condemned place. We are here because we have committed some mistake and we are meant to suffer. Of course, sometimes the suffering is little less than you are born in America. Or you can migrate. But if you have really done something which is very bad, then you are born in India. But when you see with the yogic vision, what do you declare? You say, while all other nations are bhogi yoni, that much is all right. You get a reward for whatever good or whatever deed. But India is a land of yogi yoni. When a person is ready to engage with yoga, he is born in the land of India. It's complete reversal of viewpoint. Because in India, you cannot live without engaging in yoga. This much I can assure. You go on the roads and you have yoga. Why? Because equanimity. You want to practice Vasudevam Sarvamiti? Just walk through every place, go to a hotel, whatever is served, the only way you can eat it is prasadam. Then you don't have to worry about the bacteria, virus and all those things. You drink water, it is amritam. You meet people and you have to say, Sarva bhuteshu chatmanang tato na vijugupsate. He shrinks from nothing. You'll end up shrinking from nothing. It's a fact, and though I'm putting it semi-humorously, but it's a tremendous training in yoga. Because you end up shrinking from nothing. You end up embracing everything. Because you live with everything in one single totality. What else is yoga? But to rediscover this totality we have lost. Isn't this again a sign? What was happening 100 years back? We were all in small pockets. Pockets of religion, pockets of science, pockets of this country. Within country there were all kinds of denominations. Black and white and color and brown and good and bad. All kinds of things. Where are we heading now? Towards a free mixing of all these different types. And initially people feel threatened. It's understandable, because again, infancy. But what is the eventual result of all this? Eventual result is we are moving towards a point where we rediscover the oneness we have lost. And not only the oneness of human beings, that is not enough, because we can say all humanity is one and then feel threatened by the aliens coming from somewhere in some corner. So that's not the unity that we need to. We need to discover the unity of us with creation, with nature. Don't we see this cry going around? Everywhere you will see, people talking about plastics and this kind of awareness. Is it not something new and unprecedented? I mean, we all have lived 100 years back or 200 years back, I'm sure in other bodies. Some of us carry those imprints. Or if we look at history, the offshoot of the Mahabharata war was the Gita, which is wonderful. Nobody discussed that we should have nuclear disarmament. We should have been the most logical thing to happen. Nobody discussed that. The world was almost going to finish. But there was no such discussion documented anywhere in the Mahabharata or anywhere that look. But today, we talk about it. And if we are talking about it today, tomorrow we'll end up achieving it. So this is the roadmap. There are many other things which are happening today. Incidentally, many things which we talk of as negative, if we look deep within, we will discover that's not negative. It is our eyes which are seeing with a jaundiced viewpoint. And the jaundiced viewpoint is we all want a new creation, but we want it the way I want it to be. And in that new creation, I as a parent or whatever should be at the center of things. We as human beings should be at the center of things. Excuse me, but we start from the very first premise. It's not human or this or that who is at the center. At the center there is truth. And we are living in an age of truth. All that is aligned to this truth, not only in its secret witness self, but in its unfolding. It's called very beautifully in the Isha Upanishad as Satya Dharmaya. When mankind has no other measures or order or social conventions or religious moral things to hold on to, what does he look for? He looks for Satya Dharmaya. What's my role? How should I act? What should I be? How should I do this or that? And by doing it, he will end up one day touching this great unfolding, which is unfolding itself in different ways in different individuals. It's not something uniform. If you are looking for uniformity in the new creation and confusing it with unity, it won't be. Such a new creation will become another religion, maybe a world religion. And the mother says categorically, we don't want any more religions. A new religion will not only be, it's not only redundant or some word she has used, but harmful. The word she has used subsequently is but harmful. It's not only not necessary, but it will be harmful. It's like everybody should speak the same language, everybody should follow the same belief systems. We are getting past that age. And that's something very beautiful. We are searching for something more true, more enduring. A basis of unity has never searched before. What was the basis of unity? I know, I have seen this transition. I don't know, some of us may have seen it or not, but 50 years down the line, the only woman I could dream of marrying was from my caste. That too, there were various subcastes. A Kankubj can marry only a Kankubj Brahmin, or perhaps not, I've forgotten now. May not be Kankubj others you can marry. In the Brahmin. I said, this is too much. I can't follow this. Too restrictive. Now nobody talks about all this, isn't it? So what is the deeper basis? People often lament, oh, old time marriage, so nice, it is gone. Yes, it's gone. Let's not lament over it. It won't come back if we lament. Divorce rates are high, they're high. But what is coming? That we should see. What is coming in its place? What was the core of marriage, but was forgotten in a mass of rituals and customs and institutionalization, and that was very simple, very beautiful. It was love. It was somewhere forgotten down the line. It was more like kartavyam, duty. That was the highest human beings could conceive was duty. And talk about love was something, my God, he's gone crazy. Glands going awry, need to see a doctor. Now it's the other way around. You try getting somebody married in an arranged way, you can almost write it off. And if you try all these restrictions, because I meet people, they say, oh, my daughter is not getting married. So I said, have you given an ad? Yes. I said, that's precisely what you shouldn't do. And the ad contains all these things. Brahmin or Kshatriya or this or that. I said, nobody will get married. Are you living in an anachronistic, out of time? Tell her, find out a friend for you, and if she cannot, fine, it's okay. It's not compulsory even to get married. It's perfectly fine. What a wonderful world. This cry for freedom, unity and fraternity which was dreamed, again, the revolution of 1748, I may be mistaken with the dates, the French Revolution. Today it's like everybody feels it's his birthright. And those were the days when they were kings and you can't, the revolution failed. Actually, it failed in a certain sense. But it left the idea imprinted upon the mind of the race, and that idea is taking fruit now. Everybody wants freedom from everybody else. And we feel bad about it. But 200 years back, we dreamed about it. Of course, it's not the true freedom. So, people say, oh, this is not the true freedom. Of course, it's not the true freedom. One has to be foolish to believe it's the true freedom. But let's start the process. That's how the freedom will come. If we say it's not true, then we will keep waiting. It's like people, I said, they never walk the path because they are always thinking, what is the true path? So they are always sitting on the shore. Should I not? And they are turning the path into a set of do's and don'ts. Life is not like that. It's a real journey. That's why, yoga is a real time engagement. It's not a set of books from which we can practice yoga. Nobody, even a guru, will not tell you all these steps of the journey. If you are stumbling, what are you supposed to do? Mother gives us a very beautiful framework. Hold on to me, call me. The simplest framework. Not like set of. So this is, and many other things are happening. Financial world, the grip that money had when it was in the pocket as actual notes. I don't know. People are aware of that time. The power of money which was there as actual concrete something. And now the money which is plastic, your pocket is full and empty at the same time. All that you need is to forget your credit card at home. That's all that is required. Now, it is an interesting thing because though there is money and there will be money, but it's becoming more and more abstract. It's no more, you feel very happy holding so much money in your pocket. And then you're worried, what's happening to my money in the bank and what's happening to my money more than that in my house which I have hidden in drawers. It's gone. Somebody is a fool to do that because it's like it's becoming more and more in the realm of the intangible, more going back to its original space where it belonged to. Sri Aurobindo's long back said, money is a vital force, it's not something physical. So it is something like that, and it has its purpose. Its purpose is to create beauty in the world, to prepare for the new creation in its own way, the countless ways. So this is happening with that. And the same thing we see happening in the realm of a kind of strange equation. You see, earlier we only talked about, of course in the Western context, where individuality in the Indian context was society. But if we go far back times, it was mainly the collectivity, which had an effect on the individual. If an individual lived life otherwise, he was a renegade element. Now we are trying to find a new kind of order where the two can come together. So we see that strange groupings of mankind are coming, which are cutting across the national boundaries. Strange groupings. These are experiments, as I said, which mankind is engaging in. And two tendencies, simultaneous. On one side, a strong sense of individuality. One of the cover of the Time magazine wrote, the me, mine generation. I said, yeah, it's true, but perhaps it's better than you, your generation. Where me and mine is implicit, but only for some. It's me, mine, everybody is, discovering, and naturally it takes time, as I said. So it's on one side, very strong sense of individuality, but that is also because I have a reason for it, how I understand it, because now the souls, sparks that came into creation millions of years back, at least 1 million years back, are becoming individualized, and therefore this is the time when the psychic being is close to its formation. That is one reason why we talk about the psychic being in Sri Aurobindo's yoga so much more often. I was shocked when I was reading a perspective given by somebody in Sri Aurobindo's yoga that, because this yoga is difficult, that's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo, to make it easy, created the conception of psychic being. Conception. Somebody who has known the psychic being as one knows, object A, B, C will laugh at it. It's not a conception, it's a reality. It's a change you experience when you unite with your psychic being. You discover your past lives, you discover your immortality. All this is as true as anything else in the world. It's like reading your own life's book, but from within outwards. And thereby reading the book of creation from within outwards. We read it from outside inside, that's our problem. We read it from below upwards, that's a problem. But we can read the book from above downwards and from within outwards. That's come with the discovery of the psychic being. Now, why in the previous literature we see very little mention of it? There in some of the Upanishads. Angusht Matra Purusha, Antah Sarire, Jyotirmayo Hi Shubhra. But it's not so much because the time had not yet come. It's like Sri Krishna could give the supramental truth in those days, but the world was not ready. So today the time has come when this cry for individuality is ultimately deep within, because now these souls which were inside the casing, the seed, seed has two layers, the soft layer and the hard crust. The time has come for the hard crust to melt away. And that's why the attention is turning inwards. And on the other side, a cry for something more universal. Internationalism. Today's children, you talk about them about nationality and all that, this is redundant. Or they will say you are being racist. Now it's so dangerous, you don't know. Who will suddenly tell you are being racist? Excuse me. Because they are, within them, they are cutting through these boundaries, which is good, though, it should not be a blind leap, family, nation and the world. This is the 3 steps Sri Aurobindo speaks about Vishnu, because nations also have a soul, but I'm not getting into it because it's a different dimension. But even the nations are beginning to discover their own true soul. Enough of wars and imperialism or capturing who are we, let's discover. That's what is happening in Great Britain. It's a discovery. We discovered India, but we didn't discover ourselves. So let's discover ourselves. Are we an isolated nation? What is our history? What is our past? What is our future? And every nation, America is going through it. So every nation is going through this kind of a discovery of the national soul, which is taking this form, outer form. But in children also, there is a cry for internationalism, for something more wider, global, having pizza for breakfast and dal makhani in the lunch and idli sambar at night. So this is the world we are living in. I must say, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be beautiful because what is behind this world, very simple logic, is beauty and truth and bliss. What is at the core will come out at the end. Small little story and some lines from Savitri with which we end. So the story is that a farmer is every day putting water in the soil. Years pass by. And people ask, nothing is coming out. Are you sure there is something out there? He says, yes. How are you sure? Are Baba, I have put it inside. I know how it will come, when it will come. Something which takes long to emerge, but grows very fast. That's why you see, yoga can be understood simply by observing nature. Anybody, any guess? What is that plant? Let me end with a riddle. Not plant, but let me not disclose it fully, but something which takes long to emerge, but the moment it emerges, goes very fast. And to complete the riddle, is used by Krishna for his flute. No, bamboo. It takes a few years. You don't see anything happening out there. When it comes very fast. Why does Krishna use it for his flute? Because it's hollow. Let's also become hollow. Not hollow in the way of hollow man, but free from the ego, and we'll see this emergence. Let me close with these lines from Savitri. It's every line is magnificent, but in times when we easily despair, Sri Aurobindo gives us, as always, hope. And the hope comes from the truth that is hidden behind. We don't have to go by whatever we see. If at the seed of creation there is devil, devil will come out. But if at the seed of creation there is divine, eventually its end is going to be divine. Page 600. But Maya is a veil of the absolute. A truth occult has made this mighty world. The Eternal's wisdom and self-knowledge act in ignorant mind and in the body's steps. The inconscient, those who are afraid of darkness, the inconscient is the superconscient's sleep. An unintelligible intelligence. You know, the best way we can talk about spiritual truth is sometimes by paradoxes. An unintelligible to the mind. An unintelligible intelligence invents creations, paradox profound. Spiritual thought is crammed in matter's forms. That's the original Vedas. You don't have to know Sanskrit to read the Vedas. You have to engage with life, with matter, with everything, and we will discover the Veda. Veda is there within everyone. Unseen, it throws out a dumb energy and works a miracle by machine. All here is a mystery of contraries. Darkness, a magic of self-hidden light. Suffering, some secret rapture's tragic mask, because it wants to take us to greater joy. So that limited joy must one day be taken away. Just like parents snatch away the little toy, but they have decided to send the child to school. Why? Because he can play with real stuff. And death, an instrument of perpetual life. Although death walks beside us on life's road, a dim bystander at the body's start, and a last judgment on man's futile works. Other is the riddle of its ambiguous face. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride. This soul must take to cross from birth to birth, a grey defeat, pregnant with victory, a whip to lash us towards a deathless state. The inconscient world is the spirit's self-made room, eternal night, shadow of eternal day. Now come the master line. Night is not our beginning, nor our end. She is the dark mother in whose womb we have hid, safe from too swift waking to world pain. We came to her from a supernal light. By light we live, and to the light we go. Thank you.